Hey everybody, today we're going to do a tier ranking. This time it's going to be the strongest general election candidates. This is for both parties, and it's been a little while since we did a tier ranking, so let's dive right into this. And like with most videos, there's a lot of different ways you could come up with your own results. This is not an endorsement of any of these candidates. I try to factor in a lot of things: the establishment support, the grassroots support, the anticipated funding, their personality, their name recognition, the current polling. There's plenty of different things you could factor in to bump these people up one or two tiers, or you could focus on other things and knock them down one or two tiers. So you're going to have different tiers. We're going to assume all these candidates got through the primary. They are the nominee. So first up we have Christie. And Christie, I think I'm going to start him off at the C tier. I always thought Christie was not super weak. I think he has a way of connecting with voters that other politicians might not. Of course, he's fallen hard since his peak when he was governor, but he has some of the Trump elements, and he has ties with the establishment. I think he's kind of a middle-of-the-road candidate if he made it to the general election. Next, Asa Hutchinson. He's going to go in the F tier. He has no appeal whatsoever. Even if the establishment rallied around him, he would have no momentum in a general election, and he would fall flat in all the competitive states. Next, Marianne Williamson. Now, this is a controversial one. You could say that she's a populist economic progressive, and if she was out there campaigning in the general, she would do very well. But I'm going to put her in the D tier. I do think she could do a little bit better in the D tier, but my main reasoning here is the establishment would probably completely abandon her, and that would put her at a huge disadvantage. Now, the grassroots support, I think that would be there a little bit, but for the most part, I think she would be viewed as a fringe candidate, and most Republicans would be likely to beat Williamson. She's not doing terribly in the polling, but I don't think there's enough there right now for me to put her at a higher tier. Next, Glenn Youngkin, governor of Virginia. We're going to put him in the B tier. He has been more popular than I anticipated, and I think some of that would translate well into a general election. He does bridge the Trump and establishment divide well enough, and I think he would be competitive in a general election. Not super strong, but strong enough. Next, we've got Mike Pence. Pence is going to go in the D tier. He kind of burned some bridges with the Trump base. They're not going to come out for him in a general election. And aside from that, independents, people in the suburbs, I think they would just view him as too much of a traditional family values conservative, one we might have seen back in the 1980s, 1990s, and I don't think there's a lot of appeal for Mike Pence. Next, Ron DeSantis. We're going to put him in the B tier with Glenn Youngkin. DeSantis is polling well. Of course, he's going against Trump. Otherwise, he would be the front runner. Seems like a reasonably strong candidate in a general election. We'll put him in the B tier. Next, Tim Scott. I'm going to put him in the C tier. He's definitely an optimistic guy. There is an appeal with him, but I don't think he's really going to appeal to the voters that are looking for somebody with some more fire to fight some of the cultural battles. I think economic populists in the Rust Belt, I don't think they're going to find Tim Scott all that enticing. But he's not a terrible candidate. He'd probably be a little bit better as a vice president. Next, this looks like Will Hurd. At the top of his head is cut off, and he was in the U.S. House, had the large district covering the border. If he somehow became the nominee, right now he has to go in the F tier because he's going to have no name recognition, not really much appeal with the Trump base. I think he would probably get wiped out in a general election. If he was the nominee and took it seriously, I'm sure he would go up at least one tier. Next, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is a tough call. This might be controversial. The establishment Democrats despise him. He might even have more crossover appeal with Republicans. So those are some things to consider, but I'm going to put him in the C tier. He's not polling too terribly at this point. In a general election, he probably would win some Republicans. It's hard to say how competitive he would actually be. There's a lot of speculation there. But for people looking for an alternative to Biden and the Democratic establishment, Kennedy might be their guy. We'll put him in the middle of the pack in the C tier. Next, we've got Doug Burgum, governor of North Dakota. No idea why he's running, but let's assume he is the nominee. I know he recently vetoed a speed limit increase in North Dakota. That's one of the few things I remember about him, but he has no chance to get to a general election. But that's what makes this so difficult, trying to guess how he would do if he was in the general election. I am going to put him in the F tier, purely because there's so much that's unknown, and I don't think he would really excite many voters. Of course, it depends who his opponent is. And again, I think if he ran a serious campaign, he probably would go up one tier, but for right now, I can't put him higher than the bottom tier. Next, could that be Donald Trump? Of course it is, and this is probably going to be another controversial one, but this is going to have to go in the A tier. He's likely to be the nominee, and a lot of people say he can't win. That might be true, but there's been a lot of polls out. He's very competitive in the head-to-head matchups. Of course, it's way too far out, but he already got elected once. Everybody said he couldn't do it. He only lost narrowly last time in just a few states, and it's hard to not put Trump in either the A or the B tier, and he's a wild card. So I'm going to put him in the A tier because I think he does have some potential to actually win. But I understand if you want to put him down in the B tier. Next, we have Larry Elder. This is another tough one. I'm going to put Larry Elder in the low D tier. I don't think he would get any establishment support. A lot of people don't really know who he is. I know he's not polling well. I think he would have more of a culturally populist appeal if he made it to a general election. I know he got wiped out in the California recall, but it is California. Hard to say how much appeal he would have in other states, but for right now, I think he would be a relatively weak candidate at this point in time. Next, Nikki Haley. We'll put Haley in the C tier. Similar to Tim Scott, if there were no Donald Trump and no Ron DeSantis, then I think one of these three Republicans would become the front runner. Haley has a little bit of appeal to a little bit of the electorate, but that's about it. But if she did make it to a general election, she could be competitive depending on the national environment, so she'll go in the C tier. Next, we've got Vivek Ramaswamy. This is a tough call. I will put him in the D tier next to Larry Elder. He's big on a lot of the cultural issues, combating the excesses of identity politics. There's going to be that appeal in a general election, but other than that, at this point I think he would be weak in a general election. A lot of people aren't going to know who he is. The establishment would be unlikely to support him. He's very young, and he's trying to start out at the very top. I think he has to gain some more experience, and I think if he talked up more populist economic issues, combined with establishing more of a track record, maybe winning a lower office first, that's something that would boost Ramaswamy up 1 or 2 tiers. Next, Rick Perry. I think Rick Perry's time has passed. He's not going to have much appeal. It's borderline DF. I'll put him in F. I don't know who would be excited for Rick Perry at this point. You might remember his oops line from the 2012 primary debates. Classic line, classic Rick Perry. Does not translate well into a general election win, but he would be likely to carry Texas. Next, Chris Sununu. He's already declined to run. I'll put Sununu in the C tier. I could see him having some appeal. At the same time, a lot of the hardcore base, they're not going to be a fan, but in a general election, I think he could do okay in the suburbs. He could be competitive in some of the swing states. We'll put him in the C tier. Next, we've got everybody's favorite. I don't know why he's on this list, but it's John Bolton. F tier. No explanation needed. And last, we've got Joe Biden, the incumbent. He's already in there. Very likely to be the nominee unless something happens health-wise. He might be slightly favored to win the general election at this point, so he has to go in the A tier. Of course, a scandal could come up. Anything is possible. But if anybody is going to go in the A tier, it would have to be the incumbent. Trump, the previous incumbent, he's also going to be in the A tier. And these are the tiers. This is pretty much every Democrat and Republican that has already declared or was strongly considering a run. You could probably throw Cornel West on here. I know he just declared. So these are the tiers. And again, you're going to have your own reasons for your own tiers. If I made this in another month, I'd probably change a few of these tiers myself. But who doesn't love a good old-fashioned tier ranking? Let me know in the comments. Do you agree with these tiers? If not, which of these candidates would you change? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.